of the exercise in the menu matter? And if it does, how come? Why can't I just pick and choose which ones I want to do in the moment? The way I like to tell this and explain this to some clients is that going back to compensation dysfunction. Dysfunction is a part of your body that can't function correctly. And then as a result, when we try to move, we have to move differently extra. So the order of the exercises are designed in a way to set your body up for the next step, to eliminate the compensations first, so then we can address the dysfunction. And one example I like to give is that if someone's shoulder is dysfunctional, instead of being able to get full range of motion, right? Instead of reaching forward, their body might rotate, right? If I start off with just trying to go after shoulder and I don't address this compensation, their body's just going to compensate a result. So the order does matter. Yes.
And that's what I tell clients is each exercise is going to set you up for the next exercise. And there are some guidelines that we do take into consideration as we are putting together a menu, especially after looking at the photos, functional testing, and really getting an idea of what this person's body needs. But there are some guides or rules, I guess, to menu writing. So like your example of rotation, like rotation is a very common compensation that we see. And you can do a couple of exercises to mitigate the rotation. Sometimes it takes a couple of visits to mitigate a rotation if it's very strong. But as that rotation comes out, now you'll start to see the offset, or now you'll start to see this. And if you had gone, directly after a shoulder position, that maybe is actually different once you do strip away the compensation layer. The menu's probably not going to feel very good. What I usually end up telling clients is do your menu at least once all the way through, and so then that also goes into what can you reasonably dedicate once a day to do time-wise. And then once they've done that whole menu at least once all the way through, then I'll say, throughout the day, you can have your couple favorites, that you want to do, especially if you're working from home and now you're sitting more. If you want to get up and do arm circles, but maybe they're number 5 on your menu, you don't have to go back and do the first 4 and then do your arm circles. You can just go ahead and jump right into it. And then I usually try to guide them, if you're doing something that's one-sided, or maybe that is a twisting type of exercise, you want to make sure you have time for 2 exercises so that you can do the unilateral or the rotational one, but then follow it up with something that is bilateral. So where you have to use both sides. And then I say, then you'll probably be feeling really good. Whereas if you just do the one side one, you might be feeling a little off kilter.
I definitely agree with both of you guys. The order absolutely matters. And I think as you're going through an appointment, a great way to educate the client on why the order matters and why the order is the way it is for them is through the functional testing. So like as we're going through the functional testing, I like to really highlight what I'm seeing and say like, okay, remember we saw that your right hip was elevated with your hands behind your head, looking in the mirror, or if we're on Zoom, I'll take screenshots and put them side by side, and say, look, with your hands behind your head, your hips are more level now. So this is why to address your hip elevation, we're actually going to start with some upper body work. So before we even get into the menu, I'm already trying to lay the groundwork for them to let them know, like, this is why we're doing it in this order for you, because this is how your body's responding. It's not the same for everybody, but it definitely matters. And I do also like that idea, Lisa, of telling them and reminding them that if there are favorites, that they can kind of break up their day with their favorites. Mm-hmm. And I actually find that when they come back and tell us, like, I really liked this felt really good, that ends up being really helpful information for us, where it's like, okay, well, clearly there's something there that your body's craving. So that's really helpful information too, like to relay back to us if there's some exercises that stood out to you as a client, that you really liked and that you could do all day long.
Yeah, usually as our clients, or at least the clients I work with, as they're kind of progressing in the program and then maybe they're getting ready to like space their appointments out or be a little bit more independent for a while, we'll do like a greatest hits menu. So it's like,
yeah.
Hey, of all the menus that we've done, of all the exercises, I'll put them up on the screen, tell me your top favorites. And they just might list them off in a random order. So that, based on how that person's body responds, I'll put them into a nice sequential order. We'll do it. And I'll say, there's your menu. You wrote it yourself. And to your point as well, in terms of the client education, the more that they understand their sequence, if they get into some type of situation. This happened, I think maybe like a few months back. A client called the clinic. He hadn't been in for a while, had been doing really great. Then all of a sudden his back flared up really, really poorly. And just from knowing the client, like, because we work with people for so long, you're like, I bet his hip got really hiked up and he's rotated. And then, sure enough, emailed me some screenshots because I couldn't get him on the schedule. But I was like, yep, there's the hip and then there's the shoulders. So for him, for this particular client, it was always top down. You would do upper body work to create change in the pelvis. So when we finally did meet, I was able to write him a menu without really seeing him, just going off his pictures. And he was significantly better by the time we were able to get together on the schedule. So what I told this client was, just remember, for your body, it's top down. If you look in the mirror and you see a gigantic hip and your shoulders are all tight, top down. You can start with arm circles, elbow curls, modified floor block, like all these, all these exercises. Get some that are starting at the top and then work your way into your hips and, stabilizing after that. So that it is really good education for the client. So if they are on their own, they know what to do.
When they're on their own.
Yeah, when they're on their own.
Right. Lisa, if your client, if they'd just gone after the hip and only the hip, what would have happened?
Probably would not have felt very good. Probably would have been more irritated in terms of symptom, would be my guess. And that's like someone who calls like, oh, my back really hurt, my hip really hiked, and I got in the tower and it just hurt worse. And, and it's probably because, okay, what did you do for the rotation that we tend to see in your photos, and it goes up and you're compensating, and sometimes it does work out well where a client can just hop into something directly going after the area of pain. Like my hip was up, I did my tower, felt really good, did an air bench, totally fine. Sometimes that happens, but as long as people recognize their compensation patterns, then I think that helps with, you can't just go after your back or go after your hip. Like it's all tied together. So that way it's not, you don't end up with, I did all these things and it didn't work. And it's like, oh, well, we just need this little piece, and then it'll drastically change everything.
So just having the knowledge, each individual person, like, okay, what's my main go-to compensation? And I got to take care of that first.
Yeah. And then teaching them how to see it themselves too. So like, are you in front of a mirror? Do you see where your shoulder's at? Do you see where your belly button's at? Do you see where your feet are at? Even those little things, you're not fully assessing them, but they have enough to go on and say, oh, my belly button's pointing that way instead of this way. Might be something there.
Very helpful.